Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about whether or not tuning your car, getting a pro tune, modifying your engine, increasing the power is going to overall increase the maintenance costs of your Subaru WRX or a similar vehicle. Maybe your STI, maybe your S2000, whatever it is. We're talking general tuning, specifically applied to the Subaru WRXs and STIs, but this video is applicable to basically everybody that modifies their car. But before I get too far into the video, I do want to show you guys what I drive. I'll roll a little B-roll footage shortly. This is my 2016 Subaru WRX. I went stage 1, then I went stage 2. I'm now fully pro-tuned and have a custom dyno tune from Bren Tuning, and I hope to take this car one step further and do a full engine build, and it's in the making, it's in the works. So I do apologize, the car is a little bit dirty. That's why I'm showing you the B-roll footage from a previous shoot that I did because I just went on a road trip and there's bugs everywhere. Let's roll that clip. Yeah. And before we get too far, guys, please consider subscribing to the channel. It greatly helps me put out content, get my content in front of people, and every subscription helps me build this car for you guys and take you guys through the journey of what it's like to own a Subaru WRX, especially one that's tuned. We're going to talk about multiple topics in today's video. We're going to talk about, what are kind of the general options, what's the path of modifying a vehicle look like, what are the potential implications, what are the potential maintenance costs that could increase, and generally just general information about how tuning your car is going to affect, and tuning or building your car is going to affect the long-term costs, the maintenance, the use, the fuel, everything about your modified car. So you've made the decision that you want to buy a Subaru, buy a WRX, buy an STI, buy a car and modify it to get more power. You want to be part of the car scene. You want to do all the fun things that a lot of us dream about doing, and once you get there, you do slowly almost. So let's say you're in that position. A lot of the things that might go through your mind are, is it going to be more expensive to maintain? Are things going to break faster? Am I going to use more fuel? And just generally the short answer is yes. So regardless of the path you take, when you increase power and torque on your car, you're putting more stress on the vehicle. Now there's different parts of the car that you're adding more stress to. Obviously there's the engine, there's the fueling systems, those could be the same thing. There's your transmission, there's the body of the car, there are the regulatory pieces of your car. I say regulatory pieces, but these are gonna be things like your filter, your injectors, depending on your car, your spark plugs, everything that gets changed on a regular basis, and they kind of regulate different functions of fueling, ignition, electricity, kind of the things that affect power in your car. Oxygen intake for the intake, that kind of thing. Now that's not an official term, that's just like what I like to use when I'm talking to people and explaining to people stuff about cars. Let's take, for example, my 2016 Subaru WRX. Now, when I was stage 1, I introduced a intake for my car and got a little bit of power. Stage 2, I introduced a J-pipe or a down pipe and test pipe, depending on what platform you're in. And then my final, thing that I did was I took it for a custom dyno tune. And ultimately what the dyno tune is doing is it's removing factors of safety in the engine to get more power. So a great example is, even if you have no additional parts or modifications, you can take your car to a tuner and they're going to be able to get more horsepower and torque out of the car because the car is capable of doing more, but from the factory. So Subaru has made the car and turned it down so it's safer, and you can get longer, driving, you can get better mileage out of the engine, you can get better gas mileage, all those things. So the first cost that's going to be a big increase in cost potentially is your gas and your fuel, right? So whether you're going ethanol, which could be cheaper, but you're going to use more of it, or you're just going to stay on 93 pump gas, 93 or 91, or maybe your diesel. For the most part, a tune is going to lower your gas mileage, and you're going to end up spending more, and sometimes significantly more, because you're going to want to drive the car more. Now, because I've got mine tuned as a daily driver, I'm actually just about the same miles per gallon, sometimes better, sometimes worse. But for the most part, I'm using more gasoline because I'm driving the car more. I'm using the car in a different way. I'm taking it out to have fun. And I know this is a bad way to start the video because this is more of a choice thing, but it's something to be talked about because it is a cost that you're going to have to eat. So next is going to be all the things that you need to change regularly in your car. Think about oil. once you tune your car and you're running your car much harder and you're pushing your car, you're running it just at a different level, you're gonna wanna change your oil a lot more. You're gonna wanna use better oil. Same thing goes with gasoline. You're gonna have to use top of the line, fresh gasoline. You're gonna have to change your filters more often, right? Because, great example, you push more power, you're gonna suck in more oxygen. You need more air into the engine. So my engine filter is gonna have to get changed more often. Depending on the car, if you've got injectors, you're gonna have to change those, potentially upgrade them, but those are gonna have to be changed more often. You're gonna have to clean your fueling system more often, and that's a likelihood because you're changing the way it's pulling in. It might be pulling in more fuel. Just expect that your fueling system may need work in the long term. Same thing goes with spark plugs. Most tuners won't tune your car unless your spark plugs are fairly new or have just been replaced. So those things are gonna increase. You're gonna have to do them more often, and you're gonna wanna do them more often for peace of mind. So I've talked about two things that are kind of low cost in retrospect. You know, you're not gonna be that worried about the two things that I've just talked about, kind of fuel and then the normal maintenance things. So the next big thing on the list, and this is something that you should really consider when you're tuning and modifying a car, is gonna be your transmission. Now you might say, whoa, hold on, why is my transmission at risk when I modify my car? Your transmission is actually designed for the torque and horsepower specs of the car. Now what you see sometimes is with sports cars, like the Subaru WRX, the manufacturer is going to make sure there's some fluff, that there's some room, right? So the stock clutch on this car and flywheel are capable of handling a certain number of pound-feet of torque, right? And it's more than what the car can take, just in case, right? You might have a spike and boost. There might be some factory things that might happen that cause you to have a little bit more torque than you're supposed to happen, and they need to make sure the clutch can take it. Now, I think, and my betting is Subaru knows there's a massive aftermarket community, so they actually have added a good amount of fluff on that number so that you can actually go basically to where I am running the same clutch. Now, if I go any more power, I'm either going to have to upgrade my clutch to something that's like a stage 3 clutch or a stage 2 clutch from like ACT or competition clutch, or I'm just gonna have to burn through stock clutches, but that's probably not even gonna work. But I guess what I'm going at here is if you increase your power, you're gonna shorten your clutch life, and that's easy for a manual, right? So this is the big kind of key here. If you're in a manual transmission, you can change the clutch easily, right? It's something that you can replace. It's a normal thing that you have to do, where you need to really be careful. And one of the reasons why people often do not recommend tuning and modifying automatic transmissions is you're kind of stuck. There's not a lot you can do with that transmission. And if you mess that transmission up, it can cost thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars. A great example is the WRX has a CVT transmission. You can get a WRX CVT, and that transmission doesn't like it. I couldn't be running the power that I'm at comfortably on that transmission. The chances of me blowing that transmission are pretty high, and to replace it, it's about 8,000 to 12,000 new, between 8 and 12 grand, depending where in the country you are. So the third big thing, and this, we're starting to talk about big ticket items that could potentially increase your maintenance costs, and I haven't said to you guys yet, it's going to increase, because I'm just talking about the potentials here. So stick with me here, stick with me. So you got to think about your transmission. That's a big one here. The next really big one on the list is your engine, right? When you tune a car, you don't just get unlimited power out of it. What you're doing is you're really pushing the engine, you're stressing the engine, you're removing the factors of safety, which is an engineering term, which is essentially the allowance for events, let's say. You know, that's not really what it is, but you know, what ends up happening is you can have different events with your engine. You know, you can change altitude, you can have more oxygen in the air, you can have a spike and boost, and the engine needs to be able to handle all that. Now, the more power you push into it, the lower threshold it has the ability to handle those events, because those events are getting larger and larger. This is where you see some people pushing their cars way too much and blowing holes in the side of their block. It's happened, it happens. With WRXs and STIs, sometimes, especially with the EJ motor on the STIs, you see engine knock, which means you've fired in your cylinder and your rod is fired so strong or at a certain irregularity that it's actually driven some axial movement in the rod and it's hit the side of the piston shaft or, you know, your sleeve, and that's what causes rod knock. You actually have a secondary explosion that pushes it sideways, or, you know, I guess it could be along the axis of rotation, but typically you're going to see your secondary explosion happening and it throwing the bearing or throwing the rod to, you know, a Z or X axis, which is really bad, and that's what causes ultimately engine failure. So look guys, if you're pushing more power, you got to be careful of the transmission and the engine. Those are the big things, and ultimately there's no solution to it. When you tune your car and modify your car, you risk that, and it's part of the game. It's part of the thrill of doing it. But that's not why you guys are here. You guys are wondering whether or not it's going to increase your long-term maintenance costs. And you know, it's a tricky topic because I've just listed a bunch of things that could kill you financially, you know, ruin the car. Transmission goes 10 grand, engine goes 10 grand, maybe even more, right? Depending on what you've done, if it messes up your parts, depending on the labor, where you're in the country, right? We're talking catastrophic events. If you don't experience any of those, really doesn't change much, to be honest. I knock on my car, haven't experienced engine failure yet, hopefully never, or transmission failure yet, hopefully never. But ultimately, it hasn't changed the costs of the car. My insurance is the same. I'm not driving the car more. My gas mileage is essentially the same unless I'm ripping it all the time. I'm putting the same amount of gas in. I do need to only run Shell V-Power, so I guess that's an inconvenience. But as long as you know you're getting into it, you're fine to do that. And yeah, I haven't done much maintenance on the car. I guess I had to replace the electronic boost controller, which cost me a couple $100 because I had to have somebody diagnose it. I thought that's what it was, but you know, when you tune your car at this level, sometimes with electronics and things that regulate boost, especially things that interact with the tune so much, I want somebody else to check it for me that's done this thousands of times, where, you know, this is my second WRX. So it's always good to get a professional opinion on some of the things. So yes, I've had maybe a little bit of an increase of cost, but ultimately it's something that I put on the car myself, you know, and it's something that I chose to put on there. So that broke. It wasn't like an essential part of the car yet. Again, knock on the car, could happen. But I think, you know, depending on the level you're building the car, I haven't done anything super crazy with the car. Like it's made crazy power for what I've done, but it's not like I've rebuilt the engine or anything. The answer is yes and no. Will it increase your costs? Yes, you might have a few more costs if you own the car for a long time. Yes, you might incur major catastrophic costs depending on what you're doing with the car and your luck, essentially. But if you're trying to get a little bit of power, maintain a daily driver, you're not trying to rip this on a drag strip, then I think that you can run the car without increasing your maintenance costs. You may have to do more maintenance and faster, but if you're doing it yourself, you're going to be totally in line with somebody that's taking their car to the dealership to get stuff done. And if you want to do that too, maybe it's a little bit more expensive because you got to do oil changes a little bit more often, but ultimately not much is going to change. I wanted to thank you for sticking through the video. If you did stick this far through the video, please let me know in the comment section below. Let me know if you want to see any other videos. I've got lots of videos planned. I'm actually looking at buying a new car soon so I can have multiple builds, so it's not just all about my WRX. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I gave you guys some insight. There's not too much information to be talked here, but it's something that people have been asking me forever, so I thought I'd put a video out to address it and scare those of you that need to be scared, and make those of you that are too scared feel a little bit better, hopefully, because I think that that's really what ends up happening. You're either so terrified of tuning and modifying your car because you think it's going to cost you thousands of dollars a month to maintain it. Hopefully it doesn't. It probably won't. If you're worried about that, start with a WRX and go stage 2. You're going to feel awesome about the ride. It's going to have a lot more power. It's going to be super fun. It'll be a great way to start your tuning experience. And there's a lot of like exterior stuff you can do too that will get your hands dirty in what, you know, working on cars is like. With all that said, those of you guys that aren't scared enough, I hope you start to realize that things like your engine and transmission are the things at risk when you try to cut corners. And it's amazing how many people like email me and message me, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just a lack of knowledge because you haven't been exposed to it. You know, things like putting an intake on without a tune, huge no-no, right? We're not just risking your intake, you're risking your engine, right? So if you aren't scared of modifying your car a little bit, right, you're probably in the wrong space and you need to be a little bit afraid, because that ultimately, that little bit of fear is gonna be what causes you to take better care of your car. And that's ultimately what it breaks down to. So I hope I helped you guys. I hope this video was valuable. Thanks for being here. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more WRX content.